Tom Waits is not an artist you just stumble upon. You have to seek him out. Part Bukowski, part Dylan, part Kerouac, his real-life persona seems to be a conglomerate of the characters he sang about on stage. With a voice that's been described as something between a cherry bomb and a clown, his songs are synonymous with the seedier side of Los Angeles. So hang on to your pork pie hat as we pay a visit to 21 of the most essential Southern California locations. So Whittier, California has long since been swallowed up by Los Angeles suburbia. But in the early 50s, it was still its own town. It was very small and sleepy, but it was its own place. And it's the home of Whittier College, where Richard Milhouse Nixon went to learn law. So Tom Waits spent his early childhood here in Whittier, and he came from a very musical family. His mother sang harmony with her three sisters, and his father was actually in a mariachi band. His very early years were spent on Pickering Avenue here, but it wasn't long before they moved into a tract home on Kentucky Avenue, and that's our first stop. So this is Kentucky Avenue, and this is where Tom and his family lived in a new tract home in this unremarkable neighborhood. It's where Tom rode his bike and made friends, and where he lived a relatively normal life. But when he was 9 years old, his parents split up, and it would radically change his life. As Tom once said, when you come from a broken home, you are forever in your life attracted to broken things. You're constantly trying to put things back together. But Tom's memories and turmoils from this nondescript little neighborhood provided the imagery for what would become one of his most brilliant songs, the aptly titled Kentucky Avenue.
Get in your jets and follow me.
Get in your jets and follow me.
I'm in the U.S. Navy.
So now we find ourselves about 100 miles south of Whittier in San Diego. Specifically, we're in Balboa Park. But not long after Tom's parents split, his mother moved here with Tom and his two sisters to a smaller suburb of San Diego called Chula Vista. And it's where Tom went to high school, did all that kind of stuff. But it's also where he discovered Wolfman Jack. And Wolfman Jack was right across the border of Mexico, so Tom assumed it was a local station and that Wolfman Jack was playing the secret music just for him. But the other teenage epiphany that occurred for him here was he went and saw James Brown live. And of course, he put together a band where he played rhythm guitar and sang. They were called The Systems. And they did songs like, you know, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag and Hit the Road Jack, things like that. But the other thing that happened to him here is he started incessantly reading the beat writers, especially Kerouac. And their need for total honesty in their writing was not a lesson that was wasted on young Tom Waits. Anyways, off to our next location here. When Tom was about 15, he got his first real job at Napoleon's Pizza here on National Avenue in National City. For 5 years, he washed dishes and made food, and most importantly, he listened to other people's conversations. Sailors on leave, hookers on the way to work, trash talk, and lurid stories of every kind. He started writing it all down because he realized there might be music in those words. Later in his career, Tom would recall stories he heard here in songs like The Ghosts of Saturday Night, and of course his epic ode to San Diego Serenade. He also used to put on that he had the entire Napoleon's menu tattooed on his stomach so he could save time by simply removing his shirt when he waited tables on a busy Saturday night. So in the 60s and early 70s, this used to be called the Heritage Coffee House, and it was basically ground zero for the San Diego folk music scene. And anyways, let's take a look inside. Tom started working here as the doorman with the intention of one day getting up on stage and performing songs. That way it could be central to the scene but not lose his standing as an observer of people. And he started by doing covers of Bob Dylan and Mississippi John Hurt, but soon evolved into original music. So there were basically two shows going on here. There was a show going on the stage inside, and then there was a show going on the sidewalk with people listening to Tom pontificate at the door. And it was debatable about which show was more popular at the time. But the one thing Tom did learn here was how to work a room, whether inside in the bar or outside in the street. Right here. Now the single fin used to be the Heritage Coffee House. In many ways, Tom created a character for a song and then became that character, and that was always the rub. Where did the stage Tom end and the real Tom begin? And in some ways, it began here at the Troubadour in West Hollywood. He started playing here during the heyday of the Laurel Canyon laid-back sound, but he was about as anti-Laurel Canyon sound as you could get. He was a very beat poet. On Mondays in the early 70s, he would make the trek up from San Diego to sign up for Hoot Night and do a few songs. And one thing led to another, and he picked up manager Herb Cohen, who got him a publishing deal, and at least he could keep himself housed and fed without having to commute back to San Diego. But even after several albums and considerable success, the Troubadour remained one of Tom's favorite hangouts, and it's right here on the street where he was hanging out one night where he met his longtime girlfriend, Rickie Lee Jones. They were hanging out with Chucky Weiss right here on the street, and they were singing next to his 55 Cadillac, the Jets song from West Side Story. But anyways, the Troubadour. This now gentrified Ramada Inn is the former location of the notorious Tropicana Motel. Notorious because every rocker who ever came through LA spent some seriously debauched time at this total dump, including moi. It was a party every night and had the rusted patio furniture lying in the bottom of the pool to prove it. Tom remembers his room here being $9 a night. He liked it here, and in his words, I had a good seat at the bar. I could see everyone in the room. And then there was Duke's Coffee Shop, which was connected to the motel. If Ben Frank's up on Sunset is where all the wannabe rock stars of the day hung out after the bars closed, then Duke's is where all the been-there-done-that dealers, one-night stands, and jaded music junkies could be found nursing hangovers and downing diner coffee and Monte Cristo sandwiches the next morning. It was communal tables here, so conversation was mandatory, and just outside was a public telephone booth, and I would venture to say that more real music business was conducted in that phone booth than anywhere else on the planet. Tom's room was actually a tiny bungalow in the back, and he had sawn the kitchen counter off and demolished a pantry closet so he could cram his small upright Steinway piano in the kitchenette. A lot of songs were written on that piano by Tom and by girlfriend Rickie Lee Jones. The interior of the room was a succession of paths between books, records, empty bottles, and magazines, and my bet is housekeeping refused to set foot in there unless they got combat pay. But the Trop location was ideal. It was around the corner from Barney's Beanery and a quick stumble home from the Troubadour just a couple blocks down Santa Monica Boulevard. Even though the 70s was the golden era for the sensitive singer-songwriter, I think Tom Waits was way more Maynard G. Krebs than Jackson Browne. And I think it's fitting that on the way to some of his old haunts, we do a little shout-out here at one of his contemporaries at the time, Charles Bukowski. You know, Tom loved Bukowski's work, but he was not a fan of the term poet. Tom preferred storyteller. And I think at the time, really his only equals were Dylan, probably Warren Zevon, and then, of course, the incomparable Charles Bukowski, right here. This is East 5th Street and the epicenter of Los Angeles' Skid Row. There was an old bar here, a place that had survived 2 world wars and Prohibition. It's now closed for good, but it was called the King Eddie Saloon. And the King Eddie Saloon was a favorite haunt of Charles Bukowski, and it's where Tom came up with some of the ideas for his classic song, Tom Traubert's Blues. And as Tom was fond of pointing out, no matter how far these tramps have fallen, every one of them started out as some mother's son. Now, Tom was famous for writing his songs by living them out first, but later, after he'd gotten married and settled down, he realized, as he put it, a guy that writes murder mysteries doesn't have to be a real murderer. And, you know, I think he just may have had something there. So by the time Tom got signed by David Geffen and Asylum, he was living here in Silver Lake and soon after moved to this bungalow right here on Coronado. His first album was called Closing Time and features the song Old 55. And what I find most interesting about this song is it became a radio staple because it was covered by the Eagles on their album Desperado. And Tom found their version of it very antiseptic, but you have to wonder if his aversion to antiseptic kept him from cashing the rather large royalty checks that I'm sure came from the song. Anyways, right here, Silver Lake. So this is the intersection of Alvarado and Sunset and is specifically mentioned in Tom's song, Emotional Weather Report. It's also the home of Burrito King, a famous burrito stand frequented by folks like Warren Zevon, Graham Parsons, and Tom Waits. Apparently to a songwriter, a burrito here is like drinking the miracle waters from the grottos of Lourdes, France. About a block off Hollywood Boulevard in the very bowels of Hollywood is the Ivar Theater. And the Ivar Theater used to be a stripper joint, and it used to feature a once-a-week bring your camera night to get some great family portraits. The Ivar is another specific location mentioned in Emotional Weather Report, where Tom mentions that it was colder than a ticket taker smell at the Ivar on a Saturday night. Right here. We're going to go around the block. There's a place that's connected with this, but you can only reach it from there. So let's take a look. So now we're in the back of the Ivar Theater, and we're on Cosmo Street. And this right here used to be one of the seedier bars in Los Angeles. It was called the Sewers of Paris. And on any given night, it was either drag queens or closeted businessmen leading double lives. The wealth of song imagery in this neighborhood at the time was virtually bottomless. But anyways, the Sewers of Paris. This location on 3rd Street used to be the record plant, and in 1975, Tom recorded Nighthawks at the Diner here with a live audience in its tracking room. At the time, making a live album of new unreleased material was something that only comedians did, but those were the kind of chances Tom liked to take. Anyways, in 1986, the record plant relocated a couple miles east to make way for this paragon of Southern California culture, the Strip Mall. So we're on the corner of Selma and Cahuenga in a totally gentrified part of downtown Hollywood. This used to be a really sketchy neighborhood. And right here was the former location of Wally Heider's Studio 3. And this is where Tom recorded a string of about 3 or 4 albums with legendary producer Bones Howe. And you can see the thing right here. Although I don't see Tom's name on it. I'm sure he'd make a great riff off of that if he could. But anyways, let's check it out. So Bones Howe and Tom had a shared love of beat poetry, especially Kerouac. And they went with a decidedly jazz combo approach to the next couple records he did. It was the absolute heyday of singer-songwriters singing confessional verse, chorus, verse pop songs. And Tom was doing Bukowski-esque poetic narratives about afternoons spent in seedy diners and bars. But they were like paintings being done in the language of jazz. Now, he did some other work right out here at Hyder 4, which was just down the street, about half a block. There used to be a restaurant there called Martoni's that everyone would go to when they recorded there. You know, it's been said that Tom found more beauty in the gutter than most people found in the Garden of Eden. And I think if you walk around this neighborhood, there's a lot of truth in that. So, here we are. This high school complex is the former site of Metro Media Square. It was once run by television pioneer Norman Lear, and in 1977 he created Fernwood Tonight, which was a short-lived talk show spoof starring Martin Mull and Fred Willard. The hilarity of Fernwood Tonight was that the mock guests were talentless locals,
And for their most legendary episode, they had Tom Waits as their guest. He performed The Piano Has Been Drinking, and when Martin Mull asked him why he had brought a bottle of liquor with him, he famously replied, "I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy."
This place used to be Desilu Studios, and yes, it's where I Love Lucy was filmed. Not to mention the Andy Griffith Show, and more recently the Chappelle Show was filmed here. In 1980, this was the production offices for Zoetrope Studios, and it's where Francis Ford Coppola's film One from the Heart was in production. And Tom was here, he had an office here because he was composing for the film. But it's also where he met his very soon-to-be future wife, Kathleen Brennan, who was working here as a story editor. Tom has described it as love at first sight, and she became his eventual writing partner, producer. As far as the film went, One from the Heart, it's probably gone down as Francis Ford Coppola's biggest flop, but it did serve to radically change Tom Waits' life. I guess something good came out of it. But anyways, Desilu Studios right here.
A couple blocks down the street from the Tropicana Motel in La Cienega is Norm's Coffee Shop. Open all night, Norm's was cheap and still attracts an interesting crowd, and its mid-century modern architecture is something right out of an Ed Ruscha painting. A self-proclaimed pioneer of the palate, Tom sang about strange-looking patty melts at Norm's and coffee that just wasn't strong enough to defend itself.
So we're in the little Filipino town section of Los Angeles right now, and we're at this vegan cafe, this cool place. It's called The Tribal, and this used to be called the Travelers Cafe. Tom moved to this Echo Park neighborhood here on Union Boulevard with his wife Kathleen, and being the ever private person that he was, he used to conduct most of his interviews right here in what was really his de facto office. Tom put out an unbelievable amount of music, and as he used to say, if you got the stove heated up, you might as well make more than one pancake. But you know, a lot of ink has been splashed in this cafe trying to figure Tom out, and I think he reveled in trying to make that as difficult for the interviewers as possible. But anyways, we're gonna go check an interesting spot right here. So in the alley right here on Dawson Street is where Tom's video In the Neighborhood from Swordfish Trombones was filmed. It was shot by legendary cinematographer Haskell Wexler, and it's kind of a, if you've ever seen it before, it's almost like a New Orleans funeral, if you will, as a, you know, kind of bounce around in the alley right here. So Swordfish Trombones was to be the last album that was written and produced here in LA for Tom. And in many ways, it's a Fellini-esque walk around the block, and it's a kind of fitting tribute to bringing his days here in LA to an end. But anyways, In the Neighborhood. You know, other than a dingy bar on a gray afternoon, I think the most enduring place that you think of when you think of Tom Waits is a diner, and we're here at Canner's on Fairfax. It's been around for years and years, and Tom spent a lot of time here, so let's check it out. You know, if there was a Jeopardy tournament and you could pick just one name from the annals of music to play for you, I think I'd pick Tom Waits. I think he's the smartest, most charismatic musician maybe that we've ever had. I also think he's the most quotable musician that we've ever had, and no matter how cool you think you are, Tom Waits will always be cooler. But anyways, I want to thank you for hanging out with us here. If you haven't done it yet, I'd appreciate your subscription to the channel, and keep playing it and keep playing it loud. All right, peace out to you. Bye-bye.